So just before we get started, I just wanted to provide a brief introduction for Professor Kumar. She is an expert in the international implications of U.S. patent law, as well as in administrative law issues in intellectual property law. She received her JD at the University of Chicago Law School. She then went on to spend 2 years at Duke University Law School as a faculty fellow and was part of the Center for Genome Ethics, Law, and Policy. After completing her fellowship, Professor Kumar clerked for the Honorable Judge Kenneth Ripple on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. She became the co-director for the University of Houston Law's Intellectual Property and Information Law in 2016. And she has received many awards for teaching, including the University of Houston Teaching Excellence Award. And today she'll be speaking on the various career paths of intellectual property. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. If that changes, definitely let me know. So today my goal is to talk to all of you about patent-related careers. And I'm going to be tailoring this to people with life science backgrounds. I'll be talking about what is a patent agent, what kind of work do patent agents do, what does a patent attorney do, what are the types of jobs that you can do related to patent law with a law degree, without a law degree, and kind of just give you a sense of what's out there. I'll also spend a little bit of time towards the end talking about law school, applying for law school, what kinds of classes do you want for a patent-related career, and then I'm happy to answer questions afterwards on a variety of topics. So let me start out talking about life sciences in particular. So there's bad news and there's good news. So the bad news is there is a glut of people with life science degrees seeking to do patent-related careers. So lots of people think they're going to go to medical school, they major in biology or biochem or the like, then they don't go to medical school. And then they decide, let's go to law school instead, or let's pursue a patent career. So in terms of technical background areas, life science degrees are unfortunately in kind of the lowest rung of desirability. But there's good news, which is many of you have advanced degrees or are currently pursuing one. If you have an advanced degree in life sciences, then you have a much higher chance of being able to do patent-related work. And that's especially true if you have a PhD. Those people are in the highest demand for life science type of patent work. Now, it's important to note geography is going to play a role in terms of where you can find a job. We don't have many companies in Houston, for example, doing pharmaceutical development or the like. So for some of those careers, they're going to involve leaving Houston or leaving Texas, depending on what it is that you want to do. But with advanced degrees, there are jobs available. So what I want to do first is focus on what it means to be a patent agent. Because this is a career option that requires spending the least amount of money and the least amount of time, given the backgrounds that all of you currently have. So starting with, what does a patent agent do? Patent agents draft patent applications for inventors. So the patent agent will work very closely with the inventor. They'll get to know what the inventor's idea is. They'll help the inventor, get this onto paper. This is a very highly technical job. You have to understand the invention well enough to be able to draft it in the form that the Patent and Trademark Office, the PTO, will accept. So it's technical with regard to being able to get the ideas of the inventor onto paper. It's also technical in that the language of the PTO is really its own thing. I don't know how many of you have looked at a patent before, but you'll notice it's nearly impossible to read, and when you get to the claim language, it's like one very long run-on sentence. And you're thinking to yourself, why would anybody draft something that's one long run-on sentence? Well, because that's what's required by the PTO. There's all these rules with regard to how to draft a proper claim. So part of what the patent agent is doing as well is learning that form of writing, learning how to write things in a way that the PTO will accept it, will issue the patent, and that hopefully years down the line will survive if challenged in court. So that's the basics of what a patent agent does. The next thing that's good to know is, where does a patent agent work? So first of all, a patent agent can work independently. If you wanted to, you could become a patent agent, put out your shingle, have your own clients, and just work independently filing patents for inventions. However, most patent agents work for law firms. And the reason why is a couple of things. So first of all, there are jobs at law firms, and law firms will provide you with training in terms of the basics of patent law, in terms of understanding how to actually draft those patent claims. It's not something that you can just learn overnight, and I'll talk a little bit about the patent bar exam in a bit, but it's not something you learn just from studying to take the patent bar exam. It's something you have to be taught. And so most people will go to a law firm that will provide training and then work as a patent agent in the law firm. Also, most patent agents work in law firms because most clients seeking a patent go to a law firm. And the reason why is patent language has to be drafted to withstand legal challenges. And attorneys are going to have a better idea of the pitfalls that need to be avoided than a patent agent, because the attorneys will have the full training from going to law school and will have a better sense of what ways might this patent be attacked years in the future, such that we need to draft it a certain way now to avoid those potential problems. So when most inventors want to get patent protection, they're not going to go to an independent patent agent. Most people are going to go to a law firm. So consequently, that's where the jobs tend to be for patent agents. So how do you become a patent agent? First of all, you have to have a required technical background. The place where you can learn about kind of all the background requirements is in the Patent and Trademark Office's General Requirements Bulletin. If you haven't taken a look yet at the General Requirements Bulletin on the PTO page, it's super useful, and I would recommend that as just sort of a starting point in exploring this career option. Generally speaking, what you need is an undergraduate Bachelor of Science in a technical, scientific kind of field, like biology, chemistry, biochemistry, or the like. There's a detailed list of undergraduate degrees in the General Requirements Bulletin, so if your degree is a little bit more unusual, you can always check the bulletin and figure it out. I should also mention there are other options if your degree is not on the list. For example, I have a math degree, and for whatever reason, math does not count as a technical undergraduate for PTO purposes. However, I had 40 hours of science coursework, and there's another way of qualifying for the patent bar where you prove, hey, look, I took 40 hours of science classes, and I am more than competent to write patent applications. So there's other ways of qualifying, even if your degree is not on the list. That's the first step. The second step to becoming a patent agent is you have to pass what we call the patent bar. So this is a 6-hour multiple choice exam. You take it at a Prometric site, so it's one of those things where you can take it at any time of year. You just register to take it, you pay your fee to the PTO. Usually it just takes a couple of weeks for them to then get back to you and say, okay, you now have a 3-month window in which to take this exam. The patent bar exam requires a lot of study time, roughly 160 hours to 200 hours of time spent studying for this exam. And I'm happy to talk more about study tips and like what are the different ways to study during the Q&A if that's something that people are interested in. But for now, I'll move on to some other just more related topics. Another thing about patent agents, a question you might have is, how are patent agents different from technical consultants? So generally speaking, technical consultants are people who have not yet passed the patent bar. They tend to be people with advanced degrees, often a PhD, who work at a law firm, and they're helping with patent drafting things that they don't yet have the patent bar under their belt. As you might guess, they get paid a lot less because they have not yet passed the patent bar. There's a whole hierarchy here, right? Like think about technical consultant, then patent agent, then patent attorney in terms of salary. But oftentimes, like if you're studying for the patent bar, if you have a degree that's highly in demand, you may still get hired, and then the law firm will provide you with resources to study for and pass the patent bar. How are patent agents different from patent attorneys or patent lawyers? That's really simple. Patent agents don't have a law degree. That's the only difference. So patent attorneys who wish to help draft patents, they take the exact same patent bar exam that patent agents take. In fact, you can take the patent bar as a non-lawyer, become a patent agent, and then later go to law school and convert to becoming a registered patent attorney, just by letting the PTO know, hey, I've gone to law school and now my status is different. It's the same licensing exam for everybody. So the only difference really between being a patent agent versus a patent attorney is whether or not you've gone to law school. So that's being a patent agent in a nutshell. Like I said, patent agents tend to be very specialized. They tend to be trained inside of a law firm. You do have sort of a maxing out in your career. You can only go so far as a patent agent before you need to get that law degree if you want to be able to advance further. So what I'm going to do now is switch gears a little bit and talk about, well, what does it mean if you actually go and get the JD, you get the law degree? What are your career options then as an attorney who is interested in technology, who wants to do patent-related work? What can you do with the law degree? So the thing that many people don't realize is actually that you have 3 different career paths for being a patent attorney, or 3 different types of work you can do. So the first path is to be a patent prosecutor. What does that mean? That's exactly, or very similar, I should say, to being a patent agent, but now you have the greater expertise. So you are an attorney who is working with inventors and helping draft patent language. You're communicating with the Patent and Trademark Office, submitting the patent application, handling rejections from the PTO, working with your client to get the patent issued. Unlike a patent agent, you're going to have like more career opportunities, more room for advancement. You'll probably be supervising patent agents and technical consultants as a patent attorney and working closely with them. Some of the pros, or really the primary pro or advantage of choosing a prosecution-related career path as an attorney is that you tend to have a more predictable work schedule. It's very rare that you have patent prosecution emergencies because the deadlines are very clear. Like, unless a client is coming to you and saying, my rights are expiring in 1 week and I need you to immediately file this, like, you don't generally have patent emergencies in that regard. So it tends to be a little bit more steady in terms of the work. It tends to be a little bit more predictable. So some people find that very attractive. Other people find that to be completely boring. They don't want to just be sitting there writing patent applications. They want to be in court. They want to be litigating cases. So if that's you, then patent prosecution may not be the subspecialty that you want to go into. So that's career option number one as an attorney, prosecutor. Career option number two is to become a patent litigator. So a patent litigator is a person who actually is involved with patent infringement types of lawsuits. You might be representing a party that's suing for patent infringement, or you may be representing a party that's defending itself against a patent infringement case. Patent litigators get to argue in court. All the kind of, fun stuff you might be thinking of associated with becoming a lawyer, arguing before a jury, taking depositions, giving an oral argument before an appellate court. That's the kind of stuff that you eventually get to do as a patent litigator. Note that I said eventually, because I practiced as a patent litigator, and all I mostly did was sit in a windowless room, searching through documents, and helping prepare things for the more senior lawyers who then got to go to court and argue and do all that fun stuff. So when you're more junior on the totem pole, you may not actually get to do all of that all those fun things. You may be doing some of the more mundane stuff initially. Some of the other things that patent litigators do besides just handling cases in federal court, they also can handle disputes before the International Trade Commission. So this is an agency that is involved when goods are being imported into the United States that infringe a patent, or they can infringe other IP. And what you do is you try to get an exclusion order from the International Trade Commission to get customs to basically seize the goods at the border and prevent them from ever entering into the United States. That's something else that patent litigators do. They handle these types of agency disputes in the ITC. With patent litigation, I should also mention technical backgrounds are not as important. So this is an area where a number of students I've had over the years who say only had undergraduates in life science fields or only a master's degree in a life science field have found it easier to get a career in patent litigation because the technical background is not as important as it is when you're actually drafting the patent application. Part of it is just skills as being a good litigator, being good at arguing your case, being good at writing, being good at communicating very complex ideas in a plain and easy to understand fashion for a jury. So that's another good option for you if maybe you don't have the PhD, but you're interested in a legal career, is to go on the litigation side of the work. There's a third career path for patent attorneys that many people aren't aware of, which is transactional patent law or transactional intellectual property or IP. This can be any number of things. So a transactional attorney may work at a large law firm helping corporate attorneys with mergers and acquisitions. What the transactional attorney does is they work to help review patent and other IP agreements, making sure that the IP rights have been properly transferred. I actually got to do some of this while I was at Kirkland and Ellis. So it was 75% patent litigation, 25% transactional, and I got to work on some of these big M&As, these mergers and acquisitions, reviewing documents. And I actually found the work to be very interesting. Like, you get to really dig into a transaction, get to learn more about the company, and I found it to be really enjoyable. Another transactional type of work that's available is drafting patent and IP-related employment agreements or just corporate agreements in general. This may be agreements for transferring IP rights. This may be agreements for employees who are starting at a company with regard to assignment of patent rights. It can be any number of things, but there's a lot of drafting types of things. Licensing is another example, the licensing of patents. Also, working in-house, like if that's something that you might want to do one day, you might want to work for a company. It can often help that you've had some transactional background, that you have some understanding of the corporate side of patent law and IP. People who go in-house tend to have more versatile kinds of backgrounds. Maybe they've done some litigation and they've done some transactional. Or maybe they were all transactional, but they really understand IP, patent law practice in general, and can interface with specialized patent attorneys outside the company that the company works with. For example, I have friends who work as IP counsel, and what their job is to do is when there's patent litigation going on, they coordinate with outside counsel. There's some large fancy law firm that gets hired to litigate the case, and the in-house person is the liaison between big fancy law firm and all the people inside the company. So they're serving this vital role in helping make sure the proper information goes back and forth and the like. Working in-house, it's worth mentioning, generally it's less hours. Generally it's sort of like a saner lifestyle compared to working in a large law firm. There is an exception, which is oil companies. Like my understanding is working in-house for an oil company is basically the same hours as working in a large law firm. You're not really getting that, the lifestyle benefit. Lifestyle benefit tends to come more when you go to like more traditional types of companies. I'm going to transition now to talking a little bit about law school. So a lot of you have already earned a whole lot of degrees, and now you're thinking, well, is it worth going and earning yet another degree and getting the JD and becoming a lawyer? So let me just speak a little bit about this. So first of all, let me mention this. Getting into law school is almost entirely based on your GPA and your LSAT score. And of those two things, it's more your LSAT score than your GPA. So if you are thinking about going to law school, your number one job becomes get as high of a score as possible on the LSAT by studying for that exam, because it is a preppable exam, just like the SAT, just like the GRE. It's something that with a lot of hard work, you can really raise your score quite a bit. Your LSAT score is critical because it's going to it basically signals what law schools can you get into and what kind of scholarship money can you get. Because most law schools award scholarship money based on merit, and they do it based on your GPA and your LSAT score, because they want to attract people in that higher bracket to help their numbers and to make them look better for U.S. News and World Report's rankings. So the LSAT score is extremely important. Which law school should you attend if you're thinking of applying law school? The general wisdom is to go to the best law school that you can get into, because you're buying a name. There's a lot of reputation involved with attending a law school, and people will care which law school did you graduate from. However, there are two things to be mindful of beyond just get into the best school. One is, where do you want to practice? Because geographic area is important. So let's say you get into a school in Texas, and then you get into a school that's ranked maybe just 5 or 10 spots higher that's not in Texas. At that point, it makes sense to ask, well, how well would the out-of-state school serve me in terms of getting me a job in Texas, assuming that that's where you want to work? Right? Like if there's a specific area that you're looking, a specific region where you want to practice, like you want to stay in Houston, or you want to stay in Texas, in that case, you should consider, does the school actually place people in jobs in the city where I want to work? Given a choice between a school in Houston and a school in Dallas where they're not that different in, rank, I would say go to the school in Houston if that's where you want to work. If you want to work in Dallas, then go to the school in Dallas. A second thing you have to be mindful of is debt load. So all of you probably have some amount of student loans already to have gotten to the point where you are. And law school is then incredibly expensive on top of that. It's not worth it, in my mind, to go to a school that's just a tiny bit better if it's going to cost you a whole lot more. It's different if there's a huge, if there's a really big gap. Like you're looking at a school in the top 50 versus a school in the top 10. Then to me, it's a no-brainer. Go to the higher ranked school, get more, even if it means more debt. But you have to be mindful of that. You have to make that calculus as well. Another thing to consider is, does the school have a part-time program? So for some of you, it may be an option to say, work as a patent agent and then go to school at night. So at University of Houston, I get a few students every year who are patent agents full-time, who are taking classes at night to become patent attorneys. Obviously, by working full-time, you help manage your debt load. There are clear flip sides to this. It is very difficult to work full-time and then to go to school at night. So it's burdensome in that regard. It takes longer to do your law degree. So, there are pros and cons of that. But that is another way to kind of manage the costs, is to be working and going to law school at the same time. Let's see, almost at 12:30. So let me just briefly talk about what classes you might think about in law school taking to help prepare you for your career. I'll just speak very briefly about that, and then I want to open things up for questions in terms of the specific things that you are wondering about. So generally speaking, for law, I would say there are 4 areas that you want to be thinking of when you're taking classes in law school. The first area is basic intellectual property classes. You want to take patents. You want to take copyrights. You want to take trademarks. You want to learn the basics of intellectual property. And then, maybe your 3rd year, you want to take some advanced patent classes. Like if your law school offers a class on patent prosecution and you're thinking about becoming a prosecutor, that's something you should take. But you don't want to just take all IP classes. I see a lot of people make that mistake in law school. You also want to take basic corporate classes, things like tax, business organizations, classes that teach you about the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. You want to understand the basics of businesses. Part of that is because you may end up wanting to be in-house counsel one day. Part of that is you may end up interested in transactional issues. Part of it also, though, is in patent litigation, lots of different issues can come up. So unless you're 100% certain, like all you're going to do is patent prosecution, you're just going to be writing the applications, it's good to also have a solid corporate foundation. Third, you want to take a few litigation classes. Like unless, again, you're 100% sure you want to be drafting patent applications, it's good to take a few litigation-related classes like evidence, like trial advocacy, where you're learning the basics of litigation. And then finally, kind of in a category by itself, you want to take a class on administrative law. This is kind of my area of specialty, administrative law and patents. All of the work that you do as a patent attorney will involve one of 2 federal agencies, either the Patent and Trademark Office or the U.S. International Trade Commission. And there's a whole language in terms of dealing with agencies that's different than dealing with a court. So administrative law is where you learn about that language. It's where you learn about the Administrative Procedure Act. So those are kind of the basic areas that you want to think about if you do decide to go to law school. And with that, what I'd like to do now is just generally open it up to questions. Like, I'm happy to talk more about studying for the patent bar. I'm happy to talk more about, is law school worth it? Anything that you guys want, just let me know.
So I have a question.
Great.
So one thing you sort of didn't touch on and is kind of prevalent here at our school is, I think about 50% of our school is international students,
Okay.
roughly there. And I was just curious about what are the career options for those folks in IP law?
So the career options for international people, and in some regard, it's not that much different, right? You can still sit for the patent bar, as far as I know. You can still go to law school. The difference, though, is going to be whether or not a law firm is going to be able to sponsor you for a green card if you don't have permanent residency. And unfortunately, at that point, you start diving into immigration and kind of like all the restrictions that we currently have on H-1B visas and the like. So it's one of those things that tends to vary by presidential administrations in terms of how many visas are available and how much power law firms have in sponsoring people with foreign backgrounds. But it's unfortunately, it's the same. It's not something specific to law per se, as it is for any working in any job in the U.S. when you don't have permanent residency. So there's nothing specific I can say from a legal perspective other than it's going to be the same hurdles that you typically face of whether or not someone can sponsor you in for a job.
I have a question. So is the JD recognized in any other country besides the US?
That's a good question. Is the JD recognized in any other country but the US? The answer is no. Legal systems are country specific. So there is a degree that I'll talk about if, actually I have to back up. So if you think you may be interested in doing patent-related work but outside the U.S., then there's not going to be much to do in the U.S. while you're here, because what you're going to need is whatever that country's specific requirements are. And every country is different in terms of what they require for patent attorneys. So in most countries, except in the U.S. and Canada, lawyers have undergraduate degrees. And patent lawyers have technical degrees, and they tend to be separated out. So like in the UK, for example, the people who work as patent agents aren't lawyers. They just have the technical backgrounds. And then there are attorneys who lack the technical background but have the legal background, and these groups work together. And there are a few people who have both undergrads in law and technical backgrounds that can do both, but generally they're split out. I will mention that in the U.S. we do have a degree which is called the LLM. It's a master's in law, and it's geared towards foreign attorneys. So if you have a foreign undergraduate degree that's in law, that's something that you can come to the U.S., do 1 year of training in the U.S. legal system, and it's meant for you then to take back to your home country and just to help you in your practice. But generally speaking, unless you plan to stay in the U.S. and work here, the U.S. JD is not going to be very useful.
I have a question.
Yes.
So doing IP with a PhD degree and JD, let's say, if the job is relatively stable compared to other just normal lawyer, just without...
Is the job, sorry, it's a little bit hard to hear you. Are you asking, like, if you have the PhD, is the job market relatively stable for people seeking patent law careers?
Let's say I have a JD and PhD, then is the job market more stable to the IP attorney compared to other like law field?
Yes, it is more stable. If you have both a JD and a PhD, then you're basically going to have first pick of the patent jobs that are available that that are technical in your field, right? So people with PhDs do have a big advantage over people with just master's degrees or people with just undergraduate degrees when it comes to patent work. And that's true for both becoming a patent agent and also true if you get the JD and wish to become a patent lawyer. Even if you end up litigating or doing transactional work that doesn't strictly require the technical background. I still see people with PhDs having an extra benefit over those who don't have it, because you have such a greater depth of knowledge compared to someone with, say, just an undergraduate degree. Law firms like hiring people with PhDs in scientific fields. So yeah, I do think it gives you a benefit in the job market.
Because I was scared, because I know some of the lawyers, and then they told me it's very competitive market, and I mean, they are not doing IP law, but yeah,
Well, if you're not doing IP law, then it's not going to make any difference. So let me be clear. So if you're doing non-IP law, people won't care that you have a PhD in life sciences because it's not going to relate to your job. So if you end up doing tax, if you end up doing something completely different, that PhD is not going to matter because it just doesn't have any direct applicability. If you have a PhD and you want to do patents, then it's something the law firm can brag about, and it's something that will improve your ability to understand technology, whether you're litigating, whether you're working on mergers and acquisitions, or whether you're drafting patent applications. But I mean, again, one thing I should emphasize is having flexibility geographically helps a lot. When you see people who say, I can only work in Houston, it becomes a lot more complicated in terms of finding a job because some, like I said, pharma that's primarily in New Jersey and the north, kind of New England area. A lot of bioengineering stuff is going on in California. So you may have to move to get, to be able to take full advantage of your PhD depending on what your subdiscipline is.
Hi, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Does GPA matter in just getting a patent agent position?
For patent agents, not nearly as much. GPA is more of an issue when you're applying to law school. With patent agents, it's more the experience that you have. So having a low GPA can easily be, my understanding at least, I should preface this by saying I have not worked as a patent agent. But what I have seen is that they care more about your work experience because that's what's going to show the employer kind of your depth of knowledge in your field. So it's not that you necessarily have to have a high GPA. I should also mention that most people with scientific undergraduates don't have as high of a GPA compared to someone who goes and earns a liberal arts degree. And both employers for patent agents and to some degree even law schools will take that into account.
So how is our PhD considered in applying for law school?
It's a plus, but again, with law schools, they are so number-driven that LSAT and GPA count for most. So, like, the way I would think about it is maybe, when you're predicting your chance of getting into law school, you can predict with about maybe 75% accuracy what law school you can get into just by knowing someone's LSAT and their GPA. With the remaining 25% being other factors, like you have a PhD, you have lots of work experience, you have special life circumstances, you have interesting background, those kinds of things. I don't know if it still exists, but there used to actually be like a generator, like a number generator, where you could plug in your LSAT and your GPA, and it would tell you the probability of being able to get into all law schools in the U.S. I don't know if they still have that, but yeah, I would say that like it's sort of in that 20 to 25%, pluses to your application that your PhD would come in. And some law schools, it varies. Some law schools are really eager to get people with technical backgrounds interested in patent law, and they're more likely to dip lower on GPA because they know it's harder to get a high GPA with scientific fields compared to someone who has maybe a political science undergraduate degree or a philosophy undergrad. So you do see that as well. But every law school, unfortunately, is different, so it can be hard to say in the abstract. I certainly wouldn't not apply to law school just because you're looking at your GPA and thinking, wow, my GPA is too low. If your GPA is low, the thing you should be doing is studying extra hard to take the LSAT.
Also the scholarship, it's not just focused on the age, like still the PhD applicant, I mean, applicant who has PhD can apply for the scholarship too, like.
Are you talking about scholarships for law school?
Yeah,
Yeah, scholarships for law school, they tend to be merit-based, and almost always it's based on LSAT score and GPA, because again, schools are very number-obsessed. So the U.S. News and World Report's law school ranking, it's something that students, obviously students are very concerned about it, like how high ranked is the school I'm going to. Likewise, law schools are very concerned about it in terms of how do we get our school ranked higher. And so part of the way that they game that is they focus their scholarship money primarily to people who will help their U.S. News ranking. What's the easiest way to do that? Give scholarship money to people with high LSAT scores and or high GPAs. So again, the PhD would be a plus maybe for that, but with most schools, they're focusing primarily on hard numbers.
Also, you talk about the patent bar exam. So I just look at a couple of the online options. So do you think they're okay to study with the online patent bar?
Yeah, so let's talk about studying for the patent bar. So let me first say this. Almost nobody takes those really expensive patent bar classes, the ones that you see like PRG, Patent Resource Group is the gold standard, PLI. Those classes run around $3,000 to $4,000. They're incredibly expensive. The only people who take those things are the ones who have somebody else paying for it. Like they're already a practicing attorney and their firm is paying for them to take the class. That's the typical people who take those. What most of my students do is self-study. Most of my students will go and they'll get all the old patent exams, the ones that have been released. And they'll go and they'll go onto eBay and try to find like old patent bar books. It's important you try to find the most recent patent bar books that you can because patent law changes. In particular, you need books that came after the America Invents Act went into effect in 2013. But the thing is, most people just do self-study. And the reason why is you're out, I want to say $200 every time you fail the patent bar. I think it's like $200 or $300 to register. It's much cheaper to just take and fail the patent bar a few times than it is to take a $4,000 class. And nobody knows if you failed, right? There is no list of like, this person took the patent bar 10 times. No one knows. And more importantly, most people fail the patent bar at least once. Like, this is super common. I will fully admit, I failed the patent bar one time when I took it as an associate. This happens because the pass rate is something like 40%. So it's not like the highest pass rate. So there's nothing wrong with doing self-study, with taking it, not passing it the first time. There's no shame in that. The key thing you want to be doing when you're studying for the patent bar is actually two key things. One key thing is you want to get used to looking up answers in the Manual of Patent Examination and Procedure, the MPEP. Because when you're on the exam, you get an electronic copy of the MPEP. And the faster you get at looking up answers to questions, the better you will do on the patent bar. So part of what you study is you take those old exam questions, you have no idea what the answer is, and you practice looking up the answers. Part of what you do when you're studying is you buy old books off eBay or the like, and you just read up on sort of general basics of patent law. But even more important than both of those things is the third thing, which is they reuse questions left and right on the patent bar, and they draw from released questions. At least some of your exam will be questions that are publicly available. So you also want to just be as familiar as possible with the questions that have already been released, because some percentage of your exam will be based on old questions. And that way you can quickly answer the ones that have been released that you know already, and then focus your time on looking up the answers to the ones that you don't know. But yeah, short answer, you don't need to spend $4,000 on a patent bar class. What else can I tell you?
I also am curious, So you're talking about how more and more people are going for both their JD and their PhD. So how prevalent is our agent positions, or how possible is it right out of law or right out of our PhD to get a position as a patent agent?
Unfortunately, I don't have a clear enough sense because that's something that's very not region specific. That's something that's very discipline specific. Often, what it's going to turn on is whether the law firm already has people with PhDs in your particular discipline versus if they don't. I could not tell you what the probability is, unfortunately, because most of the career stuff I deal with is with actual attorneys. So that might be something. I know you have more speakers lined up for your series. That might be something to ask if you have a guest who comes in who actually is currently at a law firm that hires patent agents or has worked as a patent agent before. They may be able to give you a better sense of that. I mean, what you could do is just search in terms of seeing like what job listings exist at law firms for patent agent positions. Like do a search for patent agent, your discipline, law firms, Houston, and see just kind of what kind of listings you find. But yeah, it's not something that I could really predict or give you an accurate statistic for. If anyone has questions general to law school too, like just like whether you should go to law school, just things specific to that, I'm also happy to address those questions.
It's not specific. I have a question. It's not about law school, but can you tell us a little bit about what counts as patentable invention and what is considered like a general improvement from what is already existing?
To answer that question would probably take like several hours. It's such a big question. So actually, your question though reminded me of something that I should say, which is if you want to just learn more about patent law in general, if you're interested in kind of current patent legal issues, there is a great blog. It is called Patently Obvious, or Patently O. Patently Obvious is a great blog to start reading if you're thinking about a patent law career, because they talk about a lot of current issues about patentability, about Section 101, like what constitutes eligible subject material, like all this kind of nitty-gritty you can start getting a sense of by reading Patently Obvious. Also, this is a useful blog because they have job listings as well that are patent related, and I believe they have patent agent listings in addition to patent attorney ones. So I would look at that blog, but I wish I could give you a short answer to your question because it's an interesting one, but it's unfortunately would require just a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of like substantive patent law.
Are there any experiences that you recommend for patent agents to have besides just the PhD, like shadowing or like I don't know?
It's not, for being a patent attorney, because what you're talking about is only I'm going to say only an investment of 160 to 200 hours plus the fees that you'll pay to take the patent bar. I don't feel like it's so important that you have that experience before you become a patent agent. And the reason why is if you take the time, you take the patent bar, you start working as a patent agent, and then you decide, well, maybe I don't enjoy this as much, or maybe this isn't the career path for me. You really haven't lost a whole lot at that point. You've gained some interesting skills, you've learned some new things, and you're not out that much of an investment of money or investment of time. Where the shadowing is a really good idea is if you're thinking of going to law school and you're thinking of, I want to become a patent attorney, I want to become a litigator, a prosecutor, or the like. When you're talking about spending up to $50,000 a year in law school tuition, that is a great time to pause and say, maybe I should like reach out to people in the community who are doing this work already, see what kind of work they do, see what kind of life they have, and make sure that that's something that I'm interested in, and kind of learn more about what kind of job roles they have. That'll also give you just generally a benefit when you're applying into law school if you have an actual idea of what a patent attorney really does. Like, I think that that's only going to help your application. And kind of a corollary to this is when you apply to law school, you write a personal statement. And like I said, you know, while 75% of getting into law school is numbers, the 25% includes things like your personal statement that you wrote for getting into law school. And law schools get so many super generic personal statements like, I love the law, I did volunteer work and I was heartbroken and want to help poor people. Just sort of like just generic-y things. I did AmeriCorps, or I worked as a school teacher in an impoverished neighborhood for 1 year. Like, you get so many personal statements based on this. Like, better if you have this technical background, if you have this interest in patent law, to be able to talk about kind of like your career path, and to be able to say, I have these skills, and like, you know, to have the job that I want, I need this law degree. Like, the law school is what's going to get me onto the trajectory, onto the career path that I want. If you can speak about that, like, I feel like that's going to make a much better personal statement than just, I love the law, I'm good at arguing, my Aunt Mildred says I would be a really great patent attorney. Like, you don't want that in your personal statement. You know, and so in that regard, having a clear sense of career paths for patents or for whatever area of law it is that interests you is only going to help you as you're applying.
Out of curiosity, since you came from a math background, what drew you into going to law school, and also did you know you were going to do patent law going into it?
So I actually was interested from software. So I have 2 degrees. I have the Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy, and I have the Bachelor of Science in Math. And I knew that I wanted a job where I could have, you know, like some technical parts to it, but I'd also get to do a lot of writing and communicating with other people. I knew that I didn't want to be in just a purely technical area. And so what got me actually interested in going to law school was I became interested in open source software. I became interested in Linux and the GPL license and how software licensing works and how patents kind of interplay with software licensing. And so it was more coming from a copyright perspective that I entered into law school. And then once I got into law school, I realized that patent law was a lot more interesting to me. Not to mention there are many more jobs in patents versus what there is in copyright, but also just how many big, meaty patent issues there were. And that's kind of what made me decide to specialize in patents in particular. And then, I mean, obviously I ended up on an academic career trajectory, which is sort of its own, you know, different subspecies of being in law. But yeah, it was really just kind of finding like the technical, like I had this technical ability, I had this technical side, but I really wanted to write, I wanted to have more interaction with people, and law was a good way to kind of bring both of those things together.
Well, does anybody have any last questions? Well, thank you again, Professor Kumar, for speaking with us today. And we're actually filming this, so we should have this online at the GSBS website.